the way that Jason made work, like this thing where you start with something and then it just starts going. And like things that seem to be unassociated to each other sort of moving out and then somehow coming back. Like maybe there's some sort of general thing that you're looking at or interested in or investigating or making something out of, and like this over here and this over here, which seem unrelated, somehow find themselves in some relationship. And you know, this thing of these consumer items or objects which he made so much work out of mixed with him.
Jean Rouch always said an artist needs immense courage, immense courage, and I think that sort of idea of him taking risks. I mean, Jason took enormous risks, which, you know, in some kind of way, for his life, for his art, there were no limits. He was fearless, completely, utterly, totally. Basically, he was an idea machine. That's another point which I think is very important. It's not that he just had one idea and then executed it. It was permanently morphing and changing. The fact that, you know, objects for him, obviously, objects had a sculptural, you know, meaning. And it's kind of interesting. I'm just looking here at this passage where he says, "My work is based in the idea of a tool for perception or a vehicle for thinking. My interest is in how the car can be used as a tool for hauling physical things, mental things, and also a tool that can be used to propel oneself through space." So I think very often for him, objects, it wasn't this idea of a freeze, a situation that he would freeze an object into a ready-made. He'd actually, you know, still use these objects with a function, and it was a kind of a détournement. It's this sort of situationist idea that you suddenly turn something into its opposite. I think also the idea that the ready-made is not necessarily irreversible. It's not necessarily that we take this object and put it on a print and it's in the museum and it doesn't return to reality anymore. You know, it's like a wheel which spins in all directions, the sort of idea of the ready-made in Jason. It's because you can actually bring something from the art world into the real world, and then all of a sudden from the you know, not that the art world wouldn't be real, but, you know, you can bring it from some other function, from some other world into the art world and then give it another reality, but then you can bring it again back to reality. That's why these cars, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be this idea that the car would only be in the exhibition. The car can then go out again. And I think that sort of whole idea of blurring of art and life, you know, also started in the West Coast, interestingly enough. It started with Alan Capro, and it started with this sort of whole idea of Capro's blurring of art and life, and it started, you know, and I think in an interesting way, you know, you cannot, and that's also sort of fascinating, we cannot reduce Jason to kind of one of these schools.
There's a great interview with Ulrich Obrist where Jason talks about shopping as a sculptural gesture, driving to the place, getting the box, opening the box, taking the thing out. He said that's the same as like a, you know, chiseling marble. So purchasing was part of his artistic process. So part of his process was, you know, and we did it all the time. If something broke in the studio, you just set it aside and you go buy a new one.
Does the unexpected day together hold the one element certainly was this sort of combination of influences and sources, really, and of course there was an autobiographical element with the piece coming from the family farm. So that, I think, was one element. Then it was, of course, the combination of the three. I mean, probably organic and artificial and soft and hard. And I mean, the peas, of course, are sort of organic but not living. The fish roe is, of course, it is a real organic material, and of course, as fish eggs, also a source of other life in some ways. But I do remember the one element we did talk about was people could use this, and that maybe you go to developing countries, and here's this wonderful thing people could build houses from. I'm not sure what would happen if you built a house from it and you're somewhere in South America and Africa and have sort of that monsoon or combination of monsoon and then hot sunshine on the fish roe. But I do remember that this was sort of almost like a serious practical application with the material as a sort of kind of development aid. The actual purpose of this material was never really specified except in conversation. But I do think an element of it was also again like some revolutionary business idea. Okay, here we've got this fantastic building material and everyone will use it, and maybe we'll sell it at Home Depot and we sell it to developing countries.
PeaRoeFoam becomes sequential, and that carries over to Black Pussy. That there is a directed order in which you experience different environments, and each environment is controlled. So on a compositional, sort of formal level, I think it changes. But then content-wise, I think you're really right, that there's this shift from something that was sculptural and chaotic. Like creation myth, there's a sculpture in the middle, and there are elements that are each kind of sculptures. And then there is the sort of machine that blows the smoke rings, which it's a sculpture that does something or whatever. But in a perfect world, you had these figures in it. There was chaos and there was sculpture, and then there were the drawings that were kind of maps. But PeaRoeFoam, the idea that it would emphasize process over product. Maybe this is it. Maybe it's that there's some correlation between an industrial process in which each room has a function and the composition of it, so that the formal and the form content thing is in tighter relationship in PeaRoeFoam.
Jason was always very sort of quite specific about what he wanted, and in a way quite demanding, really. I mean, we always were worried about what it actually meant for the biennial. I mean, the biennial was quite good about having certain finances for projects available, but still, we knew that he was an ambitious artist, that he worked with lots of stuff and material, and in the end, actually, that worked out very well. But it did become actually quite a really elaborate and demanding project for us as well, because it wasn't just a pool, which, as it was an inflatable pool, you could actually ship quite comfortably, but at the same time there was the 30 pallets of PeaRoeFoam with all the materials, with the containers of the peas and the foam and the glue and the roe and the Maryland Chambers cardboard to construct it with the Perfect World tubes. I also remember that he wanted quite the pallets always had to be really, didn't supposed to be like our pallets, but like have really good quality wood. That was a very important element. And then we got this huge delivery of these 30 pallets, which were arranged around the pool in the space. And it was always, there was a sort of a real degree of ambition, and always these pallets, and he said it was 14,000 pounds of material, which just sounds enormous, and I hope it's enough for the construction of or the performance we're going to do. So for European, it always seemed like American dimensions in terms of material and stuff you needed. Then for the opening of the Liverpool Biennial, he planned with PeaRoeFoamers, who were doing all the mixing of the PeaRoeFoam, which of course meant huge containers, buckets of the hard peas and the virgin foam beads mixed with white glue. I mean, all and not to forget, of course, the salmon roe. I mean, the whole thing was a complete terrible mess. Fortunately, it happened within the perimeters of the pool, and the pool had a floor and everything, so it was quite contained. But I mean, the idea was, of course, taking these strange things and this what you always call to create this revolutionary building material.
So what you have here now is kind of a problem. Structure to your thing. You can go into the more mobile. Yeah, this is a really nice scene over here in the snow thing. So more. Hey, Lucas, more virgin beat. Yeah, just do the virgin, do it all. I really, when the virgin beat starts to flow, I just like to do it all. I can't help it. I just do it.
If he was forced to describe what he did, well, sometimes he'd tell people all kinds of things, but he settled generally on a sculptor. He was a sculptor. Is what he did. That's how he defined himself if he was forced to do it. And it's amazing how strong the work is without him. It's just so strong that yes, it's tricky, and yes, there's this, for me, and for anyone who knew him or worked for him or was around him, there's this huge hole in the middle of everything anytime you see it. Despite that, the work is so strong that when you put it together, it works as formal sculpture, for sure. Really beautiful. And every day I look and think about his work, and I'm always finding something new. It never stops. It never gets old. It's amazing.